Okay, gewaltig. So yesterday we learned the Heilige Mishnah on Daf Chav Ches Amar Aleph about an interesting comment that someone made, and that was, as the Gemara explained, there was a storm going on, and this person was pretty sure that by the time the storm was over, all of his saplings would be completely destroyed. And because of that, he said, Hare elu netios ha'elu karbon in enam nuktzasais. And the Gemara tells us, you might think he doesn't really mean to make it asur. Why? Because he only said it because he didn't think they would survive. Had he known that they would survive this windstorm, he would never have given them away. He would have never asked for them. Kamash malon, that this is a sincere nether, and in fact, they do become asur. And the same thing goes if there was a fire raging in his house, and he knew that all of his clothing were going to get burnt to a crisp. And he said, Talis zu carbon, if this talis happens to survive this fire, it will be asur bano, it'll be a carbon. So then, im enam nisrefes yesh lehem pigeon. So really what the Mishnah means to say, if they survived, they will become kodesh, and therefore you could be paid of them. The Gemara wanted to know, why doesn't the Mishnah just say what it means to say, that the nether is chal and there's a kedusha on them? So the Gemara answers, because in the second case of the Mishnah, which we'll focus more on today, the wording, the psak that the Tana had to use was ein lohem pigeon. So to stay parallel with the end of the Mishnah, the Tana used the term yesh lo pigeon, but that's not really the focus of the Tana. The focus of the Tana is to tell you that these Nedarim are valid Nedarim. Now, pigeon. What is this pigeon thing? If someone makes a nether, koinim kikar ze alai, that's something that you cannot be paid. So what pigeon here are we talking about? So the Ram actually brings two pshatim in what's happening in this Mishnah. In one pshat, the Ram says, when he said netius ha'elu carbon, it was not a nether, like a typical nidra iser. He was actually saying that I'm donating these to the base of Mikdash to be a carbon. Now, of course, you can't be makrib a plant on a mizbeach. So what he meant was, we're going to sell the plant, and whatever the value of the plant is, we're going to use that money to buy a carbon with. So yesh lam pigeon means they become kadosh, and therefore you have to redeem them, and with the cash you buy a carbon. That's one shot in the round. Now the shot in the round was, it's following the sheet of Reb Meir. Although if you say kodim kikar ze alai, you can't be paid. It just means that kikar will be asur to you. But if you say kodim kikar ze to everybody, so now you're creating an isur anoah to everybody on this kikar, zok Reb Meir chidush, that kikar in fact can be redeemed. That was the first half of the Mishnah. And now we're going to analyze the second half of the Mishnah. Harei netiyos ha'elu carbon achi yiktzitzu. This sapling should be, or these saplings should be a carbon until they cut down. So that's exactly the opposite of what the first case was. The first case was it should become a carbon if it doesn't get cut down. Now we're saying it becomes a carbon until it gets cut down. Talazu carbon achatisser. There we say ein lahem pigeon. So let's get an understanding of what this nether means and why is it that it cannot be redeemed. So let's see what the Gemara says. We're at the two dots, 4 lines from the bottom, or 5 lines from the bottom of Daf Chav Ches Amud Beis. Harei netiyos ha'elu carbon. Frek the Gemara. Ula olam. It means forever. Forever they will be a carbon. Amar bar pada. Zok bar pada, let me explain to you what this means. Padon chayzrois v'kaychois. Padon chayzrois v'kaychois ad sheyiktitzu. When someone says this should be a carbon until it gets cut down, that means it becomes asur. So let's use the first pshat. It becomes designated as an item that has to be sold so that we could buy a carbon with the money. And even after you redeem it, it will automatically become kodesh again, because that's what you said. These netiyas should be a carbon until they get cut down. Meaning, even if I'm paid it should go and become hektish again. And this could go, you could be paid that 100 times, but until it gets cut, it will automatically become Kodesh again. But Niktzitzu, once it was harvested, once it was cut, you still need to be paid it because it has its Kedusha from before it was cut. But paid on Pam Achas V'dayan. Then you could be paid it just one time and it will not become Kodesh again. Let's see the Ran on Bar Pada. Zok the Heilige Ran. U'la'olam pirish bitmiya. Klomer hek efsher shelo yehei lahem pidyon u'la'olam. How is it possible? The Mishnah says ein lahem pidyon. Is it possible that something of hektish can never be redeemed? Amar Bar Pada, not that it can't be redeemed, but my neder is such that even if it's redeemed, it should become kodesh again. Chodesh v'kedoshos. Klomer kikatani ein lahem pidyon. Hainu kozman shaloi niktzitzu. That the Mishnah says that they don't have pidyon, that's before they get cut down. But after they get cut down, you can be paid to them once and they remain chulin. V'lav lememra shaloi yehei lahem pidyon klal. It doesn't mean that you can't actually redeem it. Klomer shaloi yehei pidyonim nitzvos b'kedushason. That when you're paid to them, don't say the pidyon doesn't work, and therefore the money that I placed to be instead of these nitiyos don't take on kedusha, but as a matter of fact, they do take on kedusha because, as a matter of fact, the opinion works. Wow! Welcome back. When did you go back? Wow! You just pulled up. Wow! Unbelievable. Welcome back. We're mamish learning the Gemara about what you saw. When you drive, all you see is white lines. White lines. They don't stop. It's like deja vu all over again. It doesn't stop. So we're learning now that if someone said that his nitiyos should be kodesh until they get cut down, what it means is even if I'm paid it becomes kodesh again. So as many times as you will redeem these nitiyos, they'll become kodesh again, which means it's the gift that keeps on giving. You have nitiyos that are worth $100. You put down $100 and say, okay, the $100 will get kedusha and we'll buy a carbon with it. And now the nitiyos are redeemed, so the $100 takes on its kedusha, but the nitiyos become hektish again because your nether was that it should be kodesh until it gets cut down. Meaning, even if someone is going to redeem it, it should get a new kedusha. Let me turn on the big screen. Okay. The imkain, my choizros kedoshos. So it has to mean that the first pidyon works, and then it just becomes kodesh again, because that is what the Gemara says. Choizros kedoshos, meaning the pidyon worked, but then your nether makes it that it should become kodesh a second time. Let me just get the code. Okay, develop it. This is what the Gemara means when it says Einlam Pidyon. Being paid to them while they're still unharvested will never release them totally to become chulin. Since what he said was these should be a carbon until they get cut down, what he's saying is Hareyu ke'omer beferish Hareya nitiyos ha'elu carbon me'ata v'carbon lichashiyivtu kol zaman shelo yiktzu. So what he's really doing is he's making multiple declarations that this should become kodesh. The first one is right now, but if he's paid it, then the second one, and then the third one, which means it's like he's constantly saying this should be a carbon. So therefore, even if you're paid it, he once again has made it into a carbon. V'nimtza pidyonim kadosh kol shah. Come to chois, every time he's paid it, it becomes kodesh again. Levishiyotes hein lechud. I'm sorry, v'nimtza pidyonim kadosh kol shah means every time you put money up to redeem these netiyos, the money you put up actually took on the kedusha, because in fact the tiyos were kodesh. So therefore, the money you put up for them becomes kodesh in their stead. The vishiyotes hein lechulin, the tiyos go lechulin every time you paid it. But alter but as soon as it becomes chulin, your dibur makes it that it will become hektish again. Niktitzu, poidon pamachas v'dayoy. But once it's harvested, so now your dibur that they should be kodesh achi expires, then it still has kedusha. The sphere le barpada shafapisha lo yikdishan ela achi yiktitzu. Even though you only made them kodesh until they get cut down, but the fact is they had kedusha before they were cut. They had kedusha before they were cut. The kedusha didn't just evaporate; it had a kedusha carbon, and therefore you still have to be paid, but you only have to be paid one time. So that is the shita of Barpada. Amar Barpada, pada and chayzos of toishois, pada and chayzos of toishois. That's actually yiktitzu. But once it's niktitzu, then poidon pamachas vidayoy. Ula takes a completely different perspective, and he said, Kivon sheniktitzu shuv ein poidon at all. So there's no kedusha on it at all. And in fact, the kedusha that was on it until it was cut does disappear by itself. And therefore, Rabbi Nuna right away asks Amula, you all agree that it was kadosh before you cut it down. Amalei Rabbi Nuna, kedusha shebehen leheichanal. Where did this kedusha go? It can't just evaporate. Uma ilu amar leisha hayoim at ishti ulamacher iat ishti. What if you tell the wife, I read the Kedesh for today and not for tomorrow? Are you going to tell me that the kedusha only lasts for one day? Mi nafka below get. So I want to stop here because the Gemara is going to get into a back and forth of how this can possibly work. But first, I want to get a better understanding of Ula. So just from Ula's comment, it would seem, the Ran is going to point out, that Ula is not arguing with Barpada about what occurs before the Natias get cut down. And as a matter of fact, he also agrees that as many times as your poi did, it will once again become Kaddish. It seems that Ula is only expressing an opinion regarding after they cut down, whether or not they need to be redeemed. But there's a long run here that's going to open up our eyes to other opinions. So let's have a look at the Heilige Ran. Ula Amar Kivin Sheniktitzu Shuv Ein Poidon. Why? This Svir Lei Ula holds She'ein Kiddushasan Nemsheches Elad Oisei Zman Shekdisha. You only remakish them until they're cut down. Once they're cut down, they are no longer kodesh, and the hektish will go away by itself. But once the term where you said it should be kodesh is passed, the kedusha goes away by itself, and that would be the machlokes: is does kedusha go away by itself or not? And in fact, we learned that the attack on Ula was precisely how could kedusha just go away? That's like saying a marriage will just evaporate. Because of a Rashba, the Rashba says as follows: the Ula le'polad adavar pada elo b'la'acha sheniktitzu. Like I said, Ula is only arguing on Barpada with the status of this nitiya after it was cut down. The Barpada le'paka kedusha b'chti. According to Barpada, you have to be poided. The kedusha doesn't go away by itself. Ula paka. Aval acha yiktitzu. But until this nitiya gets cut down, l'chula alma hadon chayzos v'koyzos. Everybody holds that they continue becoming kodesh again and again. Behind the katani ein lahem pidyon, and that would explain the words of the Mishnah ein lahem pidyon, ein lahem pidyon before they're cut down, because as many times as you'll be paid it will automatically become kodesh again. Now this will now have an impact halacha l'maisa. The chiva and shekain, since this is what Ula holds, which means it's unanimous that before it's cut down, it gets its kedusha again. Kos of Zal, the Rashba wanted to extend it to Allah L'maisa. The Mehashim Inan, Ledinim Ominous. Jo'omer L'chaveroi, Leich Chazek Ukni Soda, Oishetei Sunalach Me Achshav, Acha Elech L'Yerushalayim. So the way I envision it is, let's say I bought a property in Yerushalayim, but I don't live in Yerushalayim, so I don't need my property yet. It's called an absentee landlord. and I tell somebody, make a kinyan on my property in Yerushalayim, and you can have my property until I come, and then I need it myself. And let's say I didn't go to Yerushalayim yet. He made his kinyan, and I did not yet go to Yerushalayim. And my time to go didn't come. I'm still in Chutz La'aretz. But even while I was in Chutz La'aretz, where I had already given the property to somebody, I went to him and I bought it back. The Chazer v'kana mimenu kodim sha'ala l'Yerushalayim. Before I went to Yerushalayim, I said, I want to buy it back from you. Automatically, Zok Rashba, Chazer v'zoicher ba mekabel. Automatically, even though I paid for it, I get it, and then that moment it goes right back. Because of this Mishnah, Shekach Omerle, because this is what I originally said to him when I sold him the rights to this property until I come to Yerushalayim. And I said was, La'olam yehei shalach, these should always be yours, this property should always be yours, ad she'ela l'Yerushalayim, until I go up to Yerushalayim. Umei achshav, and the kinyan is already chal from now, u'la'oisez man, umei achshav u'la'oisez man, sheyikna oisay mimenu, nois neiloi. So kum t'chois, what I'm saying is, I'm selling you my property right now until I come to Yerushalayim. And even if I buy it back, may actually I'm giving it to you or I'm selling it to you again, which is exactly what it meant, Lagabe being makdish, the tiyos that we're talking about. Miu zokt the Rashba, this would only work this way, when you spoke out that I want the kinyan, even the second and third and fourth kinyan, but it should be chal may akshav. But if I didn't say my akshav when I gave it over to the first sale, it wouldn't work. Why? How did the person make the kinyan? Like chazekikni. He went and did some type of action. He fixed a gate. He did some improvement to the property. The chazaka zu shu machzik akshav farkolsa la'achar shekana mimenu. If what I meant is that even if I buy it back from you, it should then transfer back into your reshus. At that point, there was no action done that would create a kinyan. So I had to say my akshav, which means the action of chazaka that you're doing now should have an impact later as well. Because if not, then havalei k'mishoich parazu v'lo tiknalach elo la'achal amajoy. What if I tell you make a kinyan mashiach on my para, but you're not kinyan now? You kinyan 30 days. You will not be kinyan because you didn't make a kinyan after 30 days. The kinyan is gone. If the animal is not actually in your property at the time where the kinyan is supposed to occur, how could you possibly be kinyan if no kinyan was made? Because I want to skip the rest of the round because it's gribbling in to this shaila of how it works. But I'll call upon him. The Raj was saying, since there doesn't seem to be a dispute between Ula and Barpada about what occurs before it's cut down, and that it's a perpetual, ongoing, being makdish. So as many times as you're paid it would automatically become kadosh again. So that expression should carry through to dinei mominus as well. However, not everybody agrees with this. So I don't know who Moshe Kartavi is, but Moshe is a very uncommon name. At least in the Gemara, there's not a single Amoira whose name is Moshe. There's no Amoira whose name is Moshe, and there's no Amoira whose name is Avram. But by the Rishonim, there was a Moshe.
Everybody, Moshe Shabbat.
Well, very good. So Moshe Kartavi Cholakalav. He argued on the Rashba in Pshat of the Gemara. And he said the Barpada Ula Betarti plea. They're arguing both things. It means Ula would disagree with the fact that you have to keep on being poided before the ktitz as well. And as a matter of fact, it's not two different things. It's all totally in the same point. The same point, the same opinion will have two impacts. A is that you don't have to be poided after it's cut down. And B is a single pigeon will work before it's cut down. How are they connected? The Mishum the Sphere Leila Barpada, the Kedusha Leipaka Labichti. It's only because of Barpada's underlying svara that Kedusha doesn't evaporate by itself. And that's why you have to be poided even after it's cut down. Therefore, it's that Yosy that leads to his psak about the status of this plant before it got cut out. Therefore, Ka'amar, the Padam, Chayzres Ukdushos. What's the connection? Zokt Duran, the Ilaf Hochi, if they're not connected, Lama Leila Hai Gavra, Lememer Achiyitzu. If he meant that it should continue to be Kodesh, he just should have said, if he meant that it's not going to be, that it's not going to become Kodesh again and again, all he had to say is Hare, is Nitius Elu, should be a carbon. He stuck in extra words. Achiyitzu. What extra information did he want to say when he added those words? Achiyitzu. Im loymar shela acher mikan tehei kedushos nefkas memela. If what he meant with that achiyitzu was that I only want the kedusha to go until they get cut, and after they get cut, I want the kedusha to evaporate on its own. Efsher. That would not be possible, because remember, Barpada holds the kedusha lepaka b'chti. So once we know the kedusha will not fall off by itself, so why do I need to say ad sheyiktzu? What am I trying to say? I'm not trying to say that the kedusha should fall off by itself. So what exactly am I adding by saying ad sheyiktzu? The chivin shekain, since the word ad sheyiktzu doesn't seem to add any meaning, lama lo yiktishin lechalutin v'amadoilo. All he should have said was that it's Kaddish forever, because the Kaddish doesn't go off. So what did he mean with the Achi Yiktzu? Even if I redeemed them before they're cut, their Kedusha should return on them. When he said Ein Lam Pidyon, the Mishnah is telling us, the Mishnah can't be saying that they don't need pidyon once they're cut down, because Bar Pader's flagship psak is that hektish lepaka b'chti, the after the kedusha lepaka b'chti. Elaloimer, it must be that the words achiyitzu must be telling us something else. Elaloimer she'ein pidyonon moitziin l'chulon achiyitzu. Until it gets cut down, being paid to them will not release them from kedusha, because they'll always get a new kedusha. That's Bar Pader's approach. But the Ula Polagale, Ula argues on Barpada, the Amar, the La'aga Shenitzitzu, ain't Shrichen Pigeon. They don't need to be redeemed, because Ula holds the Kedusha Pogabachti. If I say that the Kedusha should only be until they're cut down, well, then that's what the Achiyitzu means. So now I don't have any extra meaning to say it should constantly be Kodesh again. Because the Achiyitzu was to limit the Kedusha that I put on it so that it should evaporate by itself after it gets cut down. The Chivin Shekain, Ula, according to Ula, Zeh Shamar Achiyitzu, those extra words that he mentioned, Achiyitzu, Loiba Loimar, Shafilu Yiftain, Yachsuru Luktushos and Achiyitzu. You wouldn't interpret these words like Bar Pada did, that I mean to say that it should constantly become Kodesh again and again until they get cut down. It actually means something much more simple. Elaloimar Shayu Kedushos Ad Oiseisma. All I'm trying to do is limit my hektish. It's only going to be hektish up until that point that they get cut down. So a very simple machlokes. It all depends on how you interpret Achiyitzu. Achiyitzu, its interpretation depends on what is the halacha after they get cut down. If you hold it stays kodesh anyway, so then all he could have meant with Achiyitzu was, like Bar Pada says, to constantly be makdish again. But according to Ula, Achiyitzu is to limit the length of the original kedusha. So that's what it means. But there's no reason to dream up that before it gets cut down, it should become kodesh again and again. It's a nice shot, but there's only one problem. It's ikar chosam in a sefer. All we see Ula saying here is that post ketzitza, the kedusha goes away. But he mentions nothing to the sort that he's disagreeing with Bar Pada before it becomes cut down. Why? It's an important machlokes, right? Huge. So why wouldn't the Gemara mention it? He would hold that you point it once and then it's done and it's cool. Yeah. So the lepolog ula behedya amai the amar Bar Pada padon chayjush kedushois mishum deleistrich. He felt there's no reason for me to mention it. It's an outgrowth of what I'm paskening that the kedusha is paka b'chti. The Bar Pada gufei lo yamar hachi. Even Bar Pada didn't say that. Ela mishum desvirle. The anchor Barpada's whole chain of events only started because he paskined that you need to be poided after it gets cut down. That led to everything else. So once Ula disagrees with the first psak, it stops the entire chain reaction. Well, then the entire binyan, the entire tower that Barpada built based on his psak, that it all comes crumbling down. It's obvious that Ula is arguing on anything. According to Ula, what does it mean to say? It means, let me just finish the line. It's he gufa asala shminan. That's the psak that it's trying to teach us. Shamak this davar adzman yadua me oisesman ve'elech nifka kedushasa bein tzarich pidyon. So let's just make it clear. Ein loy pidyon in the Mishnah, the psak in the Mishnah, ein loy pidyon. According to Barpada means ein loy pidyon. Your pidyon won't help. You'll have to be pointed again and again. And according to Ula, what it means is ein loy pidyon means you don't have to be pointed.
Why do you have to say that Ula argued also before
Because the Reb Moshe Kartavi holds that the only reason why we interpret his words to mean that it becomes hektish again and again is because why? What else did he mean when he said Yitzitzu? When this fellow says this should be kodesh Yitzitzu, why did he just say it should be kodesh? And I would have known that it will be kodesh up until you're pointed. It's very simple. What's he sticking in the extra word Yitzitzu? So it must be that he's trying to tell you that even if you're pointed, when it's still connected to the ground, it will be kodesh again and again. You could, but you don't need to. In other words, to say that that's what I meant is very radical. I meant to say that even if I'm pointed, it should be kodesh again. That's very radical. I'll only say that's what I meant if I don't have any other way to interpret the words that he said Yitzitzu. According to Ula, there's a so much simpler way to interpret Yitzitzu. It means I want the kedusha to be until I cut it, and then I want the kedusha to go away. So Ula's way is the most logical and simplest way to understand what he said. This should be kodesh until it gets cut down. Well, it means exactly what it said. It'll be kodesh, and when it gets cut down, it's not kodesh anymore. It's only Barpada who says that can't be what he meant, because there's no such thing as kedusha just going away by itself. So since Yitzitzu can mean what it should simply mean, and that is that the kedusha should end when I cut it down. So then, what did I mean? It must mean that I'm saying before I cut it down, it should be hektish again and again and again, and therefore a pidyon will not help. So again, we have two pshatim in what the Mishnah says. Ein loy pidyon. Ein loy pidyon, according to Barpada, is referring to before it's cut down, and ein loy pidyon means the pidyon will not release the kedusha because it becomes kodesh again and again. But after it gets cut down, yesh loy pidyon, according to Barpada, you're pointed at once and the pidyon works. According to any pidyon means that you don't have to be pointed. When don't you have to be pointed? After it got cut down. But before it got cut down, in fact, you do have to be pointed. So those are the two pshatim in Ula. So let's see the Gemara. But whatever the case is, it's all based on whether or not you hold that kedusha paka b'chti. So Barpada holds kedusha loy paka b'chti. So you for sure have to be pointed even after it was cut down. And Ula says, no, if I said it's only kodesh up until that point, then the kedusha will go away by itself. So Rav Huduna comes to Rav Barpada's defense, and he tells Ula, how could you say kedusha just evaporates? That's like saying, I'm marrying a woman for today, and then tomorrow it evaporates. Mi nafka, below get. Would anybody in their right mind suggest that the woman goes free without a get? Now let's see what the Ran says. Let's see what the Ran says, or if the Ran says anything. No, the Ran does not say it. Ran does not speak specifically on this. He goes a little bit later. Oh no, I'm sorry. The Ran does speak about it. So let's have a look. Kedusha shebehen lahechan hoch. Where did the kedusha go? I just want to make sure that I'm learning the Ran about what we learned already. Kedusha shebehen lahechan hoch. Right. So here's the Ran. The kedusha shebehen lahechan hoch. The loy svirle the tifka b'chti, because he holds it shouldn't evaporate by itself. And I don't want to skip it. I don't want to learn this. This is going to get a little complicated, and we're ready at 6:36. So let's see the Gemara weiter. Rava told Rav Hamnuna, I don't think your kasha is a good kasha. Mika Madamis Kedushas Damim L'Kedushas Aguf. In our Mishnah, we're not talking about Kedushas Aguf. You're not actually making these natis into a carbon. Their value is dedicated to go to Hektish. But when you marry a woman, that's Kedushas Aguf. She herself is becoming your wife. So how could you ask me, Akasha, that you can't marry a woman for a day? Sure, I agree with that. That's Kedushas Aguf. But the Kedusha that we're talking about in our Mishnah is Kedushas Damim. And maybe Kedushas Damim is Pakabechti. So I'm like, Rabbi, Mikam Adam is Kedushas Damim, the Kedushas Aguf. Kedushas Damim, Pakabechti. But Kedushas Aguf, like Pakabechti. So therefore, Rabbi, your Kasha on Ula, I'm sorry, Rabbi Abnuna, your Kasha on Ula is not a good Kasha. So Rabbi is defending Ula against Rabbi Abnuna's Kasha. So Abai now got, so this is, imagine you're in Bismedish, there's a whole tumult. Ula says something, Rabbi Abnuna has a Kasha on him, Rabbi sticks his head in and says it's not a Kasha, and now Abai weighs it. Amalei Abai, Kedushas Aguf, loy Paka B'chti. You made a statement that a Kedushas Aguf could never evaporate by itself, and you brought a raya from a woman being married. I'm going to prove to you that even Kedushas Aguf, even a carbon could become ois carbon without any action. So Kedushas Aguf like Paka B'chti, Vatanya, we had a brisa that says Shor Ze Oila Kol Lamajoin. Someone said this shor should be on Oila for 30 days. Ula Achar Lamajoin, and after 30 days, it should automatically become a shlama. So what is the brisa paskin? Kol Lamajoin Oila, Lachar Lamajoin Shlama. So Frek Abaye, according to your logic, Rava, that Kedushas Aguf doesn't just dissipate. Ve'amai, Kedushas Aguf, saying that an ox is an Oila is Kedushas Aguf, Upaka B'chti, and you see the Kedusha went away by itself, it becomes a Shlama. So that's a very good kash on Rava. The Zokta Gemara, Hacha b'may askinon the Omer l'demei. It must be that Rava will have to learn that this brisa is not speaking about Kedushas Aguf. When he said Shar Ze Oila, he didn't mean it should actually be an Oila. He just means that its value should become an Oila. But franked around, if you take an animal that's right to be a carbon, and you say that this shars, it's domim, I'm going to sell it and I'll buy with its money a carbon oila, it automatically becomes a carbon oila itself because it's an animal that's royal to be brought on the mizbeach. So the Ran speaks out, it's speaking that the animal had a muk. It was an animal to muk, so it could not have become a carbon itself. So there, when he said shars oila, he meant its value should be an oila. We're going to sell it and purchase with the money a carbon oila. So the Amr let me. So Zok Rava, don't ask me a kasha if I'm that brisa. That proves Kedushas Aguf, Hakabikti, because that's not Kedushas Aguf. Frank to Gemara.
I don't understand the cloud anyway. What means and what happens after? I can't do that. It's a oil for 30 days and then everything goes away.
And then it becomes a shlam. Could he have said everything goes away? Yeah. Yes, he could have.
So Bus means that for 30 days.
It means for 30 days, this animal has the din of hektish, and you have to sell it and buy with the money carbon oil. And if you wait 30 days, then you're scot free.
Or and when they say it becomes a shlomo.
So then after 30 days, you have to sell it and you have to buy an animal to bring as a carbon shlomo.
Let's say I sell it in Thursday and I buy oil.
Then it's you down. Then there's nothing left.
Even if we say what's being delivered as
that's not what he means. Here he didn't say anything that means it should become again and again. That's because he said that's yiksitsu. Here we don't have such an extra word. So but the way we attach it is that up until that point and not vatin, right? Only if you have this extra word yiksitsu, so you have a problem.
Maybe every day.
You're asking very good. You're asking very good. But this is what the Tana Paskins. And Vibal, this is what the Tana Paskins, you have a raya that by Domi Kedusha Pakabakti, but you don't necessarily have a raya that by Kedusha Gumas Pakabakti. Frank the Gemara. Yeah. And so that's a whole different question. So we'll get to that could be a whole different child. Let's focus on this. So if you're going to say that the brisa that we just quoted is speaking about Kedushas Damim and not Kedushas Guf, then you're going to have a problem because then the brisa is repetitious. because we have another case that seems to be a complete repeat of the first case. What if he said so instead of making it into an oila first, he made it into an oila second and a shlamim first? It's the same halacha. Why should it make a difference? If it's kedusha dom, what's the achilek if it's an oila first or if it's a shlamim first? If you're going to learn that the two cases in the brisa is chada b'kedushas aguf, the chada b'kedushas domim, one speaking about kedushas aguf and one speaking about kedushas domim, now you have a chiddush in the reisha and you have a chiddush in the sefer, even though you don't see a clear indication that the brisa is switching over from kedushas domim to kedushas aguf. But at least you can explain it that way. But then I have a raya that kedushas aguf is pakabechti, and now it's tzurich shver on Rava. So Hainu the tzurich lelatana lemis netarti. That's why I understand why the Tana had to bring both cases, because the Sokadai de Chamina that Kedusha Guf like Pakabachti and Kedusha Dom Pakabachti. Amtulahachi Tanatarti. That's why it said both, because it wants to teach us that not only is Kedusha's Dom and Pakabachti, but even Kedusha Guf is Pakabachti. Eli Amrit, Idi Kedusha's Domim. But if you're going to tell me that the whole bride is Kedusha's Domim, Lama Lila Mistatarti. Why in the world do I need the bride to repeat the case once with Oila first and one with Shlomo first? Hashto Yesh Loimar, in the first case where it was first an Oila, which is a Kedusha Chamura, we say that it automatically goes away. And the Kedusha Kala of Shlom Mischal, Hashto Yesh Loimar in the ratio of Kedusha Chamura, Kedusha Kala Paka, Mikdusha Kala Kedusha Chamura, Tricha Lamemer. Surely if it starts off as an Oila and then if it starts off as a Shlomim and then upgrades to an Oila, for sure, the Kedusha should be Paka. So let's stop for just a minute.
If it's Kedusha again, how does it work? Then I mean, how can I?
That's a nice shayla. I don't want to get into that. I just want to focus on what haluch is, not the lumdus of how it works. That's where the be'in shir. That's where the be'in shir. But it happens by itself. It happens by itself. It would be totally in the machlokes bar pada and ula. Right? According to ula, it should happen by itself. According to bar pada, you'd have to be pointed. But let's stop for a second because we have to see where we're holding. Rav Hamuna asked a kasha. Rava said it's not a kasha because there's a chiluk between kedusha guf and kedusha domim. We've just slugged up Rava. We just proved that there is no difference between kedusha guf and kedusha domim, and in fact, they're both the same. And then, so what's happening here is Rav Hamuna said, where did the kedusha go to? Rava said, what's the problem? The kedusha could go away because it's kedusha domim. Now the Gemara said the kedusha doesn't go. Now the Gemara is saying is no, by kedusha's domim as well. By kedusha's domim as well. I'm sorry, by kedusha's guf as well. The kedusha goes away by itself, right? So where are we holding? So we're back to Rav Nuna's kasha. Kedusha shebehen leichanocha. So Rav Nuna's kasha is not going to be fair because we say that the kedusha goes away by itself. So it's not fair. It goes away. So Rav Huna is not fair anymore, right? What about Kedushin? So why does the Kedushin go away? It's also Kedushin Zuguf. So now we just need a distinction between Kedushin and Kedushin Zuguf. Because at first the Gemara seems to say they're the same. Now that the Gemara proved that by Kedushin Zuguf it goes away, and we all agree that by Kedushin doesn't go away, what's the difference between Kedushin and Kedushin Zuguf of a Behemah? I'm sorry? It's Shver and Rava who made that chiluk. So therefore, the itois of Rava, right? Exactly what you said. So I'm pointing out to 7 or 8 lines from the bottom of what Moti just came to the conclusion, the itois of Rava, because you see clearly that there would be a difference between kedushin and kedushin zagov. The vadai shmeina miha, you clearly have arrived from here. That afilu kedushin zagov pakabachti. You Rava made a statement that Kedusha Zaguf is like Pakabachti, but you clearly see that Kedusha Zaguf is Pakabachti, so it's Shver on Rava. Hilchach, L'Rava, L'Hava Le L'Hadure, L'Rav Hamnuna, Rava could not, his response to Rav Hamnuna now loses its validity. What was his response? My Kamadamis, Kedusha Zaguf, Kedusha Damim. In fact, we just proved they're the same. The Alma Shvirle, the Kedusha Zaguf, the Hektish, Loi Paka, Kedusha Guf to Isha, right? That was Rava's taina. That Kedusha Guf should be just a Kedusha. This is what Rava's teretz would have been. The loydami isha lehektish. In fact, although Rava made the original comparison and said that kedusha's guf is just like hektish, so kedusha's guf of hektish is just like kedushin, in fact, they're different. The loydami isha lehektish. Mishum the ein ishish lechatzoyin uchamoisha gesavti lamayla. You can't marry half a woman. There's no such thing as a half a marriage. So kedushin of a isha is different. There, in fact, loy pakabechti. Aval hektish, even kedusha's a guf, isa lizman yedua, va'afilu kedusha's guf pakabechti. So therefore, so we no longer have a kasha from a Ramnuna of kedusha lahechad holcha, because in fact we have a brisa that says that by kedusha zaguf it goes away by itself. The brisa misayei leilula. The key in the brisa muchacha ta'afilu kedusha zaguf pagabechti. We just proven from this brisa that even kedusha zaguf evaporates. Choshkein kedusha daman. So that's where we're holding now. We're now holding at the point where everybody must agree that kedusha's guf can evaporate by itself. Therefore, Rav Hamnuna's kasha is no longer shver on ula, and Rava's comparison from kedusha isha to kedusha's guf is obliterated. Now the problem is we have such a gavaltic raya from the bishya that kedusha guf is pakabachti. So if kedusha guf is pakabachti, now it's shver on barpada. Right? What was the chronology of the raya? There's two cases in the brisa. One is an oila turning into a shlamim, one is a shlamim turning into an oila, and they both work. And there's no chiddush of one over the other. So it must be one is speaking about kedusha damim, one is speaking about kedusha guf. But the bottom line is you have a raya that kedusha guf is pakabachti. That's shver barpada, because barpada's whole premise is based on kedusha guf like pakabachti. So up to Gemara.
It's not half marriage. There's no time to marry.
Okay. I don't want to get into that. We're middle of focusing on this side of pakabachti. So Dr. Lema to have it to yufte the barpada the amar le pakabachti. So now we're at a point from attacking ula. The whole thing got turned over on its head, and now barpada is under attack because we now have a raya that kedusha guf is pakabachti, and that is the linchpin. That is the whole yisoid of barpada's whole binyan. Kloimar. The kiman al koich of brisa, I feel with kedusha gufi, since the brisa has to be speaking by kedusha guf as well. Tikshil of arpada, you now have a kasha and barpada. You can't say that the brisa is speaking. We reported because we know barpada holds that in fact, if you're pointed kedusha guf, it will go away, right? That's why he yelled after the tzitza, you're pointed and it goes away. So you can't say that maybe that's what the Brisa is talking about, where you were pointed. So that goes back to what the Chaim said. How does it just change? Does it change by itself? So maybe it changed because you were pointed, and then it's not shreim bar pada. You can't say that. The kedusha guf ain't a pigeon. Pigeon only works on kedusha dama. On the tiyos, if it's cut down, yeah, you can sell them. But kedusha guf, you can't be pointed. I will have a betzina lememar the tavai kedusha damim. But if you could have learned that both cases in the Brisa are speaking about kedusha damim, it wouldn't be shver. The Kalamemar or the community opinion, you could say that it was speaking the pigeon. Because Barpada holds even Kedusha Damim is like Paka Bichtim. Now Barpada is stuck because it can't be speaking with pigeon because there's two cases in the Brisa. One's Kedusha Damim, one's Kedusha Aguf. The Kedusha Damim is not the pigeon, so the Kedusha Aguf could not have been the pigeon. So Huadin, the other case in the Brisa we'll assume was not with pigeon, and therefore it's Shver on Barpada. So Zog to Gemara, now we have to deal with Barpada. Lema tahava to yuvta barpada the Omar like Paka Kedusha Bechti. This is now a kasha on Barpada who said like Paka Kedusha Bechti because it seems quite clear from the Brisa, in fact, that it is Paka Bechti. Omar Papa Omalach Barpada Halchikam. Barpada is going to say, I disagree with your hanocha that the Reisha, the Seifa, have to be speaking both without pigeon. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to learn that the Reisha is speaking about Kedushas Domim. And in fact, there was pigeon, but the Seifa is going to be different. Now, the question that you're going to ask me is the same question the Gemara asked earlier. If you're going to say that the Seifa is different, there has to be some Chiddush. The whole problem is why would the Tana repeat the second case? What's the difference if it starts off as an oila and then becomes a shlamim, or if it starts off as a shlamim and then becomes an oila? Zokbar Pada, the second case is a whole new case that has its own new set of Kedusha. So the Reisha that talks about Kedusha Paka Bechti is speaking with pigeon. So of course there's no Kedusha Paka Bechti. And why did the second case repeat itself? It's because the second case is a whole different case. Hachika Amar, Imloy amar me'achshav shlomim la'achel abejoim oy lahava. And what he said is as follows. He's telling you the following chiddush, and I'm going to skip to the Ran where he actually reads the brisa with this new pshat, and then we'll explain exactly what the chidushim are. So he says, Elahachi Kamar. I'm about halfway down in the intermediate size lines. Misha Omar, someone said, La'acher shloishim yoin oila. So first he says, if you say La'acher shloishim yoin oila, and then you added the words Umay Achshav Shlom. So you're dictating what's to occur, but not in chronological order. Instead of saying it should be first a Shlomim, and then an Oila, you said La'acher shloishim yoim, it should be an Oila, and up until then, from now until then, it should be a Shlomim. So the halach is Royahu Shetehei La'acher Lamed yoim Oila. Technically, you might think that it should work. The first 30 days it should be a Shlomim, and then it should automatically be an Oila. That's what you might think. Ella, it's not true. La'acher sha'amar umei achshav Shlomim. If you say umei achshav Shlomim, Zeu shemaynea l'kedushas oila shaloi tachol, mishum l'kedushas shlomim loi pakabachti. In fact, if you said it should be an oila after 30 days, but up until then, umei achshav Shlomim, it'll become a Shlomim and it'll stay a Shlomim, because kedushas aguf loi pakabachti. He also kedushas never pakabachti. Because kedushas loi pakabachti. Shaloi taimar. Don't argue and say shezeshanu oimim shekedusha shlomim mishpashetes v'hoileches. Don't say that. What is the reason for a psak? We've just paskin that if you said in the 30 days it should be an oila, and up until then it should be a shlomim, the shlomim stays and it never becomes an oila. Don't say that the reason for it is hayim mishum shezesh she'omar la'achar shloshim yom oila ein b'dvar klum. Don't say that you know why it stays a shlomim and doesn't automatically change into an oila? It's because your nether for oila was a faulty nether. Because your nether for oila was it shouldn't be an oila today, it should be an oila in 30 days, right? And since that's not a good nether at all, that's why it becomes a shlomim. But let's say it would have been a good nesina, then maybe the oila is chal. Zokteram, don't make such a mistake. In fact, if you say Hareza Oila Lachalam Joim, it would work. It would work. So there's got to be another reason why the oil is not chal here. And it must be because the shlomim is not letting it chal. So Zokteran, don't say Haini Mishom Shezes Hamalach Shoshim Yoim Oila Ein Bedvar Klum. Don't say it's because his donation of the oila wasn't a good donation. The Kivin the Kedushas Oila Lochayla Hashta Basar Shloshim Yoim Namilachel. Don't say that the whole Messina HaOila was not good, because you cannot give something in 30 days. It has to be chal now. And therefore you'll deny, and you'll say the reason why it remains a shlomim is not because the shlomim stays and doesn't let the oil be chal. Rather, it's because the oil can't be chal even without the shlomim. Because you said, which in and of itself doesn't work. And therefore you'll be able to deny. And you'll say the reason is not because don't learn false drat and say that the reason for the shlomim staying is because shlomim, the kedusha shlomim will not go away by itself, like my father wants to say. The lesson, that's not true, because the ilu loy amar me'achshav shlomim la'achar shloshim yoim oila hapla. If you'd have just said harezu oila la'achar shloshim yoim, it would be good, and it would become an oila 30 days later. So then, why is it that if I said that should be an oila la'achar shloshim yoim, and then they said it should be shlomim me'achshav, why over there will the oila not be chal? Zokteran hilchach vadi taima the ma'ida amar hashta the loy have a oila that if you said that you in oila in 30 days, but my hashta should be a shlomim, why doesn't it become an oila? Why does it remain a shlomim? There's only one explanation for it. Hainu mishum the kedusha shlomim leipacha b'chti keinirli. So that is what the Sefer is saying. The Sefer is telling you a couple of chedushim. It's saying that if you say a razor oila lachalam join, it would work, and it's also telling you that if I say it should be an oil lachat lamejoyim, but it should be a shlomim from now. Once the shlomim is chal, the oil cannot be chal. There's kedushas aguf and kedushas damim as far as Barpad is concerned, like pakabachti. So now you have a very beautiful brisa. In the first case of the brisa, it's speaking by kedushas damim, and it's telling you that kedushas damim loy pakabachti. And the only reason why it was paka is because you were paid it, according to Barpad. And the second is not a repeat of the first. It's talking about Kedushas Aguf, and it's telling you a Chiddush that if you say that it should be an oil in 30 days, but up until then it should be a Shlomim, then the Shlomim is Chal, and it will not be Pakar B'Kti, and it will not let the oil be Chal, and the oil would have otherwise been Chal, because you could make a donation like a
Why should I have an argument that if somebody makes a donation 30 days from now, it shouldn't be?
I'm going to answer that in a second. I just want to finish this couple of lines. So Amar Rapapa, Amlach Rapada, Hachigamer, Amar Achshav Shloim, Achlam Yom Oila, Oilava Mida to have a Omer Leisha, just like someone telling a lady, his Kachalila Achalam Joim. If someone says, I'm being Mekalish you in 30 days, the Mikudeshes. It would be Mikudeshes, Va'af Aplishanas Achlamois. The same way you could be Mekalish a woman and give her money today and have the Kedushin Bichal in 30 days, so too, you could say a Rezu Oila Achalam Joim. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll be mamshech tomorrow, even though we're sort of in the middle of something, but it was a complicated thing. So what's the start time?
What's the Chiddush? Why do I need a Bryce to tell me that it works in 30 days? What?
The main chiddush of the brisa, is that once I say that it should be a shlomim now, the shlomim doesn't go away by itself. And even if otherwise the oila would have worked, since we became a shlomim first, the oila will not be able to be chalim. But I think it's kedai. I mean, it's kedai just to learn the Ran, because the Ran itemizes the chedishim. So let's have a look at the Ran from the top. This is such an important Ran. I didn't have time.
If we say that draait your the chronological order, dan moet zo gezegd maar een goede implicatie van de vierde blad. Sometimes ook gids maar oude grote masseren. Zo nou, bezoek dus is een schmeek zo. Dat is niet. Maar ja, het is even de portret. Het kan ook als de kaart het jaar is. Zweitens, de lijkt het gewoon schraal is. Dan ook bij. Dus doe het eerste als het jaar doet. En wel wil ik kunnen maken de oilen nog. Dan moet ik
I hear. So let's see what the Ran says. It's a second skinny line. The Chamash Lantarti will know two chedushim from this sefer. Chada, chiddush number one is if you just said I want to be an oil in 30 days, it works. The loitema, don't say even the loikadosh hashta. Since the kedushas oil cannot be chal now, loikadosh nami lachashaita, it won't be able to take on the kedushas oil even in 30 days. The lesser, that's not true. El lavasos im nami chayil. Midam dahava alo icha. It's no difference than giving a woman money today and telling her that the kedusha should be chal in 30 days. Just like that works, so too I could make an animal hektish. I can say today that I want the animal to become hektish in 30 days. That's the first kedusha. Midi dahava. It's Nedarim terminology. And the Kamashal Nami, the second chiddush is the dafik kishaloi amar me'achshav shlomim. The only way it can become an oil in 30 days if you didn't make it a shlomim first. There's so many chedushim. This brisa will be chock full of chedushim. Chiddush number one, chada the kedusha guf loy paka b'chti. Chiddush number two, loy tema hanamili kedusha chamur the oila the lesser ella afilu kedusha kala the shlomim loy paka b'chti. Right? So it's a second chiddush that even the kedusha of shlomim is not going to go away. V'loy tema hanamili heked amashar shlomim kol amajoyim. The b'chagayin zeh kedusha shlomim shpeshelis v'leches. And if you hit them toila achamikein kedusha oila, even if you have an oila afterwards, you might think the oila should be chal kamash v'lo no. Even from kedusha kala to a kedusha chamura, it doesn't go away. And then he also says v'loy tema hanamili kedusha shlomim kedusha oila. Maybe that only is you made the kedusha shlomim first, and you said kol shashemem it should be shlomim and then oila. But here you even made it an oila first. You first did a raise oila shlomim, and only then me'achshav. Even in that case, the shlomim is chal. So basically, according to the way Rapada will learn, this whole brayse is sharata bins. That's kedusha le'pokim b'chti, and according to Ula, the brayse is sharata bins kedusha pukim b'chti. Mamish min kutzah lekutza how to learn pshat in this Mishnah.